Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. It's January 14th, 2018. And unless you're living in a van down by the river, you know that our beloved president got himself into a pickle with the choice of words this week. The big issue is not only what the president said, but how he said it. Now, I hasten to point out that these words are vulgar, some of the most vulgar words we have in our vocabulary. They are not words that are used in polite company. They are not words that are used, presumably, by intelligent people who have a large vocabulary. But they are frequently used by this president. Our born-again, evangelical Christian president, he let loose with a vulgarism directed at third world countries in a meeting with Democrat senators and representatives. Keep in mind he denies making the statement, which is unfortunate since enough people in his own party were in the room and they're saying he did. But aside from what was intended, and which has been thoroughly scrambled and trotted out as discriminating against people of color, our president expressed himself in a vulgar epithet popular in the culture, popular in award-winning movies, being uttered by people who are viewed as intelligent, talented, and sophisticated, not the least of which are some of the very people, political types, who are now saying, I'm shocked. It's not nearly as disgusting as what our former President Obama wrote in his biography, Dreams of My Father, and then read aloud for the audio version. But what did he mean? The quote that we got, explained by his critics in the context in which it was uttered, is clearly a reference to the countries and not the people. Now, it had to do with immigration. And so we clearly are talking about people. But why are the people in such a state that we would get to the place, at least our president would say, we don't want them? Well, these are the countries run by men and women who make no effort to lift their people out of poverty or illiteracy except with money from other people. The criticism of Trump's rationale is being compared with the poor people who immigrated here in the early days of our country, people who built this country. But is that comparison legitimate? And the answer is no. Now, other than the criminals that Great Britain and others deposited here, the immigrants who came were industrious, family-oriented, willing to work. Most came with a religious orientation, meaning they understood and responded to objective moral standards. We don't even get that from our own people anymore. And when we get people sneaking in, they are able to apply for government aid with no paperwork, no nothing. And we just pay for buses to truck them all over the country and deposit them in cities, sanctuary cities that have said, yes, send them to me. We're glad to have them. We get people our government encourages to come for their own political purposes without any filter. Not all that come, even under these circumstances, fit that pattern. I have seen many folks that clearly are immigrants here, and no doubt some of which are here illegally. And I see them working, saving, building their families, even as they work in the shadows. Our president was not talking about these people. He was referencing the countries, the leadership, the conditions, the fact that the people in those countries have no life, no hope, no marketable skills. They don't bring anything to the table because of the countries they live in, not the color of their skin. Leaders who pad their own pockets at the expense of their people. Someone has suggested Haiti. Look at Haiti. Look at it on a map. Google it. Google Earth. Look at that island. You will see a line up in the hills that is almost like it was drawn by a human being. And on one side is abject poverty. On the other side is rich, lush, green, and wealth. What's the difference? Is it the people? Is it the strain of genes that run through? It's the same people group on both sides of the island. The leadership in Haiti sold their soul to the devil back in the early 1900s, late 18, whatever it was. In an official statement, service, ritual, they gave themselves to Satan, asking if the devil would just rid them of French rule, domination, they would give themselves to him. And voila, didn't take long, the French were gone. And Haiti, you don't want to live in any of their cities. It's a mess. This has nothing to do with the color of skin or the genetic predispositions and all the rest of it. It has to do with the nations they live in. Many of these countries have either no religious foundation or a religious foundation that's basically barbarian. A religion that does not inculcate personal responsibility or respect for other people. People who are brought here and then laid at our door and have for generations are doing it because their government leaders are basically crooks. Anybody want to go to Argentina? Despicable people who live in splendor while their people suffer, starve, and die. What do you call these countries? You could make a list of at least 10 right now that you would say, I really wouldn't want to live there, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids to grow up there. The dregs. Are the people there the problem? Are they takers? No. Their leadership is doing this. Our president has no business using vulgar epithets for any reason, and he should have known there were men and women in the room just lying in wait for him to make any kind of a misstep at all. But this president doesn't seem to care. And while he's clearly a profane man, many of us applaud his boldness and practicality. I don't necessarily want him to be nice all the time. His political enemies would cut his proverbial heart out in a New York minute and never look back. Rush Limbaugh played excerpts of former Democrat presidents speaking in vulgar and even overtly profane ways to people and for the record. Rolling Stone listed at least 10 former presidents from Lincoln to Truman who were not bashful about using vulgarities to express their disdain or to make a point. And all of it without a whimper from any of our self-appointed moralists. Reality? What do you expect from a man who is used to getting his way? A man who does not tolerate ignorance nor obstructionism. A man who sees the goal in terms of the shortest way to get there. And a man whose attitude, philosophy, and tactics have made him a billionaire on a global scale. Some of the criticism comes because Trump claims to be an evangelical Christian, a man walking in the ways of Jesus. Well, Christians don't talk that way. Not true Christians. In the early days of their walk with the Lord, perhaps. It's called a habit, and habits are hard to break. But clearly, if God moves in and cleans up your heart, your thinking and your mouth will follow. If it does not, then you probably are not a Christian. You just think you are. The thoughts, the words that come out of us, our intentions, flow from what the Bible calls our heart, the very seat of our being. A heart that is, as a Christian now, is new, cleansed, oriented toward God and toward goodness. When that happens, everything about us changes. However, we live in a world where being a Christian is simply a matter of praying a prayer, joining a church, adopting religious habits, speaking in tongues, or who knows what. All of which the Bible knows nothing. The Bible doesn't teach anything close to any of that stuff. And yet more and more, that's all we're getting. Donald Trump has identified himself with a liberal Presbyterian church in New York City. He says that's his home church. We're going to be talking about that denomination later in the show. But that church that he identified is a liberal church. Liberal meaning it's not following the Word of God. The leadership at this church admitted they don't see him very much. And nothing about his attitudes, vocabulary, behavior suggests that he knows what a Christian is. Donald Trump is a traditional religionist. It's the preachers, the preacherettes, and the religious hucksters who have anointed him as Christian. The rest of us are praying for him to be saved. But many of the rest of us are thankful that he's there, considering the alternatives.